I'm Jenna Seery, a bookseller and co-host of Poured Over, and today I am so excited to be joined by Jeanette Winterson. I know that so many of you will have read her works like Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, The Passion, my personal favorite, Frankissstein, and Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal. But today I'm here to talk about a very special book, her newest work called Aladdin Two Lamps. So thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just delighted to talk to you and to your readers. We all love books, and that's what brings us together.
Absolutely. And this really is a book for people who love books, who love reading, who love story, who love what it can do. I think as soon as I got into the pages and started going, immediately I was like, well, I have to reread a Thousand and One Nights. I have to go back and read.
Wow, what you did. Blimey.
I went back. I haven't made it through all of it yet, but I
No.
have been going through, and it really is an interesting journey because there's so much in there. You realize how much storytelling comes from this one work.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if we could start with just a little bit about how this book started for you.
Of course. I think as you get older, you realize the truth of the fact that the mind is more like a maze than a highway. And the mind's not interested in the clock or chronological time or the calendar. The mind just goes on with its own ideas and obsessions. And I first came across the Arabian Nights stories when I was a small child going to a pantomime of Aladdin, and then as a teenager reading a really cut down version, the one everybody knows, like from the movies and Disney, you know, Aladdin, Sinbad the Sailor. And those were my early encounters there. But I carried on working with the text in the back of my mind. And then all of a sudden, it came very clear to me. I woke up one morning, literally, and out of my mouth popped one Aladdin Two Lamps. And I thought, what the hell is that about, Jeanette? You better go find out. And I realized that after all these many, many years, this had returned to me. And I also realized, as you just said so clearly, that so much of the way we tell stories and the way that we manage narrative really goes back to those kinds of tales, which actually are not linear. This whole beginning, middle, and end is a very late invention. It's really a 19th century invention of how things happen, because it doesn't happen like that in our minds, does it? It moves all over the place. Every person listening to this podcast right now is in the present, but they've also got something on their mind from the past that they're aware of. There's something in the future they're thinking about. We don't live in one time or even in one place. And that's what you get in the nights. And I wanted to work with that.
I love that. I think that's so true because we can read, obviously, things that are happening right now. We're all inundated constantly with what is happening right now, and to a point where it can be sort of unintelligible. We know so many of us are reading things that have happened in the past. There's so much. And yet we also spend so much of our time reading about the future, and it all blends together into our existence, into our what we like, what we know, what we love, what we believe. It all comes together.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's sometimes very useful for us as individuals to think about how we construct the narrative of our own lives. I don't just mean our past, which is always open to interpretation, but I just mean how we manage it every single day. It's always a micro narrative. You know, you meet someone on the street, you say, oh, you never guess what happened to me, or you won't believe this. You know, we're always telling those stories, and the best of our friends do it just like a professional would, at heightening what's funny, leaving out what's boring. But if one of the things I wanted to show in this book is that we're all continually fictions as well as facts. You know, it's all a story that we're telling. And that can be a very freeing place to understand your own narrative. And above all, which Shahrazad is not to be controlled by the narratives of others.
I had to, when I sat down and was like, okay, I'm going to start this book, I'm going to get into it. I got so close to the beginning, and you know, the first like chapter is I can change the story. I am the story. And I had to like close the book and think about it for about 15 minutes before I continued, because that it's one of those things that of course we know it intrinsically in many ways, but to have someone say it to you to really think about what that means feels so different, especially now when, like you said, control is a huge piece of the world we live in. To be
Yes.
able to feel that autonomy through our own story is so important.
It is important. And obviously, there are some situations where a person has no autonomy. You know, if you're a woman living in Afghanistan under the Taliban right now, you don't get a lot of choice over the story that you're telling. But for many of us, there is freedom because there, and that was Freud's great discovery. No, you couldn't go back and change the past physically because we haven't got a time machine. But how you began to understand it, those who were players in it yourself, could radically alter your interpretation of it and get you away from the pain and trauma of that into something that you could own. And, that's been a huge contribution in the 20th century to our understanding of ourselves, not just as facts, things that are fixed, where things cannot change, but really as patterns and as process, and that's been the beauty of, I think, that computing intelligence has taught us, that we can see ourselves as patterns, as process, as information, not data, as information that can change.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about how you actually started writing this book? Did you do research? Were you compiling things? Do you write linearly when you are compiling a work like this that sort of encompasses so many different things?
No, I've never been a linear writer. It defeats me. I mean, beginning, middle, and end, it's not for me. And so I go where the energy is. I always have. So I'm never sure if what I'm writing is going to be the actual beginning or where it will fall. But it's also why I never get stuck, because if you're stuck, you just move the energy to a different place. You don't sit there staring at the problem. You keep the energy going by moving somewhere else, something that you can do. And that's very good for you psychologically, spiritually, and practically. These things work together. So I was just playing with it and I thought, time to read The Nights again. And of course, it's bonkers and those bits of it that drive you mad, as you must have noticed. And I thought, oh God, they just have to kill themselves. So I thought, I'll choose some of these stories and I'll retell them as well, as I'm doing the bigger narrative of my own. And really just to say, look, here's a story about a woman who is filibustering for her life. The only way this powerless woman can save herself from the chop, literally every morning, from her mad husband who just wants to kill everybody, is by telling a story that's so interesting that he lets her live another day. And I thought that's a fantastic and a metaphor for where we are now. And that all we've got to live on mostly is our resources, our wits, our invention, our imagination, to see past the present emergency, because in the nights, everybody knows the story. There's the Sultan, his wife's been unfaithful, he goes crazy, and then decides that every day he'll marry a trembling virgin and then have sex with her and kill her every morning before she's got a chance to cheat on him. Order is restored. The worst of the bro culture. You can't trust the bitches, so let's kill them. And Shahrazad is the person who just breaks the spell, and she breaks the spell with a spell of her own. So she takes away this ticking madness of the Sultan, this necrotic story of death and destruction, and she replaces it with a story that's about staying alive, being alive, and that's the glory of it. And I think people need to hear this. People need to hear this now, and have some hope in their own lives.
I have absolutely felt like if I don't, there have been days where I was like, if I don't read something that takes my brain somewhere right now, I will die. Like
Yes.
and not in a way where when necessarily reading to forget or reading to ignore, but just reading to have my brain doing something differently. And I think so much of that encapsulates what we look for in reading and what we look for in writing is that ability to think differently, think bigger.
That's exactly right. Without imagination, we can never think past the present emergency, whatever it is. And we live in a world of escalating emergencies in a kind of 24/7 panic zone, where everything is a problem. And we cannot live like that. So what we're really doing, it's not escapism in the sense of, oh, I'm just going to put my head in the sand. It's allowing your brain to do, your brain and your mind to do what is best, which is to see beyond the moment, because that's how we live best. Where somebody says, hey, I got an idea, or we can do this differently. And at the moment, we're living in a paralysis of imagination where the left has no ideas. Nobody feels that they can do anything differently, and that the world is just going to get worse. And that's no use. So when people say to me, oh, reading, it's such a luxury, what's the point? I say, what you're doing is you're protecting and reinforcing the most important tool that humans beings possess, which is not AI, it's the imagination. Because every single thing on this planet that ever was, that ever is, an idea, a building, a faith, whatever, a book, it doesn't matter what it is, the dinner you're going to make tonight, every single thing starts with an act of imagination. And if we strengthen and support that in ourselves, in our kids, in our world, then we will be able to see past the present emergency.
And I think it is important for those moments when there is a lot of rhetoric around, reading or writing as a privilege or a luxury, but that is the key. Of course it is, and that's why it must be protected, and why it is always political, and why there is always more to it than just, oh, this is the book I'm going to read tonight before I go to bed. I mean, education around literacy, all of it connects to this bigger idea.
It does. And we're not serving our kids by telling them that reading's optional, or that they can watch the movie instead, or they just need to at school to read some bleeding chunk of a longer text, and that will be enough. Because it's not enough. I don't just mean for focus and concentration in the most practical sense. Or in the ability to talk coherently, to argue your way out of a problem. All of that comes from having familiarity and fluency with language. But humans invented language. It's not like some middle class activity. We did this, and we've always done it. And it's not just to say where's the food, or where's the woolly mammoth, or where's the river. It was very soon to talk about humans and our symbolic life. We are not just blood and bone. We have a symbolic life, which is beyond all of that. We're hybrids. We're animals who can reason, animals who can imagine, animals who can think. And to do that, you need to have an imaginative self, which I think is best met by literature, by those encounters with this weird thing that we have all invented all across the globe called language, that works at this extraordinary level, not just utility, but how to express and understand the innermost workings of our souls.
And I think it also allows us to connect in a way that is beyond anything, that we can really imagine. There's so much connection through literature. I always call it communion personally for my
You're
practices,
right.
because I feel not only am I able to connect to people, through these texts, whether they're from the past, whether they're completely fictional, whether it's in the future, but it also allows me the ability to connect in my real life with people around me.
Yes, it does. I think it allows you, and of course, it allows you empathy. It allows you compassion, understanding. Through literature, even when we come across characters that we really don't like and whose actions we disapprove of, we can understand them. And that's pretty extraordinary. And it allows us to think beyond our own judgments, our own biases, even our own likes and dislikes. I think it widens the self that we are. And that can only be good. It doesn't make us kind of wishy-washy liberals. It makes us people who can rightly judge and read each situation, each person, because behind us we have this vast library that we've absorbed over our time here on planet Earth, which is giving us these capacities, these possibilities. This is absolutely not a leisure activity. It's not neutral. It is for the good of us.
And I think in so many ways, when the world feels narrow in thought, so often everyone feels very rigid. I know I've caught myself so many times having thoughts that I'm like, is that where did I pick up that thought? Because it doesn't feel like mine. And having
Mm.
to really sit with that and expand on that and to learn. And I think in reading, I'm able to do that. I'm able to make my thoughts bigger through
Yeah, and
understanding.
that's very good. I mean, it's discerning to say, hold on a minute, where did this thought come from? Because sometimes it feels like possession. It's like
Hmm.
somebody's just got hold of your mind. You think, stop. It's a horrible moment when we do find ourselves thinking or even behaving in a way where we have a phrase for it. We say that was out of character. That's not like me.
Hmm.
Well, what just happened? So we all recognize that, and I think having a way of A, recognizing it, and B, dealing with it. You're not beating yourself up. You're trying to understand.
And I do feel like, I mean, and you talk about this in the book, is that reading is a way to get closer to ourselves as well. It
Mm.
is just as much as reaching out, it feels like reaching in to really understand, okay, that is something I've thought, but why? Okay, here are these things that I can expand on that make me feel a certain way. Or, you know, even going back to say, no, I used to think this way, and now I've learned, I've grown, I've
Mm.
changed. I'm able to do all of that when I read. And I think it really is through that ability to look inward and to be closer to ourselves.
Yeah, and that's very important in a world which is now predicated on looking outwards. So getting everything from the outside, which is necessary in social media because that's the only way things can be monetized. It has to be on the surface. If it's not on the surface, you can't monetize it. And I think, reading has always been defiant. Not, when tyrants have always burned books, not just because of the contents of those books, but because of the act itself, the act of reading, it's a completely private place. I mean, maybe not when we get the BCI chip in the brain, thanks Elon Musk. I don't know what will happen to privacy. But right now, there's no CCTV in your head. You can be sitting there on the subway, or whatever, and you can be in a tumult inside or and completely transported. Nobody knows. All they see is this person reading. They have no idea what is going on. And that's really subversive. It's infuriating for people who want to monetize your every move, your every breath, your every thought, because they can't. And it's infuriating for people who want to control you because they don't know what's going on, because you're having this private experience between you and the book, which is as intimate as being with a lover. Nobody's, and you're not having some creep of a lover who's secretly filming you and then doing revenge porn. This is a place that you can totally trust. And I don't think that should be underestimated in our world. Nobody can get you there. That is truly your safe place.
Absolutely. I know I've spent more time on social media than I want.
Well,
I
stop now.
I know. I know. The number of days where I'm like, this is going to be the last time. I haven't made it there yet, but I'm working on it. And I
Yeah, and
do
look, it was a great idea, and like so many great ideas, we fucked it up. I suppose you'll have to edit that bit. We made a mess of it. But and you get that Mark Zuckerberg going about saying, "Oh, Americans have only got 3 friends and they'd like 15." I've got an idea, i.e., a business plan to solve that, and you think, just stop it now, because while it may seem that if you're reading privately, that is something that doesn't involve other people. Of course, it does, not in that moment, but in all your dealings and interactions following that moment, it really does. So what happens after that is crucial. And I think although, reading does teach you to be solitary, as you said, and also just to be by yourself in a very contented way, it also helps you just to go out there and meet people on a better footing, in a better frame of mind, and be a citizen of the world.
absolutely. I think there's a real hollowness that comes when you're just only focusing outward in that social media space, in that, you know, surface level only. And yet when I come through, I mean, the my favorite thing is to have conversations with my friends about what we're reading.
Yeah.
We, I now usually it's me coming with a stack of things saying, I need you to read all of these.
Oh.
Because that's the kind of friend I am. But I'm always interested to hear, especially my friends who don't read as often as I do, my friends that they're so busy with their lives. What did they choose? What are the things that get through to them? I love
Yeah.
seeing that. And when you really connect and discuss and sometimes have, a completely opposite experience reading a book from someone else,
Yeah.
there's nothing like it.
Which is great. It's wonderful when, and it just shows us. Um, exactly what is this collision between the text, which appears to be fixed, kind of taking us back to the Aladdin space. This appears to be fixed. This is the text, right? But we all have so many different responses to it, and it's that alchemical fusion between you, whoever you are, and this text that creates this other thing, this third thing, which is both unique to you. This is your experience, nobody else's, but also one that you can really share. And in the sharing of it, you get to hear about everyone else's experience, and you think, no, you can't think that, or wow, or whatever. So it really is this. I don't think anything else is like that in the same way, which is both so private, so personal, so unique, and then yet so shareable.
And I think it's even different. I love movies, I love TV, I
Me
love all
too.
of that as well.
Yeah,
But there's such a difference, I think, in reading because you create all of it yourself. And
you really do. Yeah.
there's so much. I mean, when I talk about certain characters in books that I've loved or hated, and someone has like a different experience, like I've been talking a lot about Wuthering Heights because there's the movie coming
Oh
up. So I'm
God,
trying
the
to get,
Emerald Fennel. Oh God,
so I've been trying to get everyone to read it first, and it's
please
not.
do.
And for me, I've had like very up and down relationship to Wuthering Heights, the book, in the years that I have read it over,
That
love.
shows sanity and good judgment.
And it's so fun to get to be in that conversation with people. I'm like, no, you have to read it. You just have to. I need to know
You
what
do.
you think about these people.
Yeah, yeah, they do need to read it, and certainly before they see this version. Look, I'd go a long way for Margot Robbie, but and in pink latex or whatever she's wearing. But I'm not sure about this version. But we shall see. But when you talk about the differences, and when we're watching a movie, even a great movie, whatever it is, we are forced to watch it frame by frame, scene by scene. We're
Mhm.
absolutely in clock time. This is how it will play out. Even if you pause it and come back, you've got to watch it. It's a linear experience to begin with. And the weird thing about reading a book is that because we very often put it down, pick it up, the space in between when we're putting it down before we pick it up, the book hasn't gone away. It's working in the background on us. It's like some drug that you take that is still active 8 hours later. The half life of coffee or whatever. You think, oh, and you're still having the conversation. So you're not in the linear space at all because when you come back to it, you're actually not the person you were when you put it down because the book has gone on doing its work.
And I have a terrible habit that my friends all hate, that I like to read the end of a book before I read the
Oh,
start. I know it's heinous, but it is my truth. And I don't do it every time, but sometimes I need to know if it's going to be worth it. And
well, oh dear, maybe you didn't get the right Christmas presents as a child. This
well,
is
that's
very,
probably true.
yeah, you just
But
need to know. Yeah, that's okay. So you can go back through. And I think the great thing that everybody knows as you get older, and sometimes you go back to books because you can, that you never start or very rarely start at the beginning again. At that point, it ceases to be anything like a linear
yes.
experience because you just dive in anywhere. It's like having sex with somebody well. You don't have to bother, with the foreplay and the niceties anymore. It's just like, okay, let's just do this. We got 15 minutes. And so you're just in there enjoying yourself with a place that feels both familiar and surprising. And you think, wow, 20 years ago, I remember that passage, but I didn't feel like this. And,
Mhm.
that's a lovely thing too.
It is. And I think especially in a book like this one, I could start on any page. I could start at any point and it would bring me there. It feels almost like any part could sort of be the beginning and you could come around back again because that is the nature of the nights. It has this cycle feeling of and every day it starts again and every day we start again. And it's a it in it, even though there are so many things in this book that I would say are not comforting, that aspect does feel comforting that every day we start again.
Well, I'm very pleased that you noticed that because it was a structural decision. It's what I wanted. That because I wanted to avoid the feeling of linearity. I wanted it to build, but I wanted to avoid linearity so that you really could, if you wanted to just pick it up, say you found it next to you on the subway and you picked it up, that you could dive in anywhere and there'd be something there you thought, oh yeah, I'll do that. because, coming back to that earlier question of yours, that is the way that I write, because I'm never sure until I number the pages, which people will be horrified to hear is not till the end, what the order is going to be. Because I want, sometimes my cleaning lady comes in, we could have a whole different book, the cat comes skidding across, where was that? Because I will not number them, because what I find that happens to me, this is just my thing, is when I start numbering things, I go into executive mode because I'm a very efficient person. And I don't want to be an efficient person when I'm in my creative life. I just need to let it talk back and to be a bit more mysterious than that. So I don't tell myself what page this is. We can figure it out later.
Is that the same when you write fiction?
Always.
Yeah,
There
that's
is
so interesting.
no difference. For me, there is no difference. I'm in my workshop. Sometimes you might say, hey, Jeanette, make me a wardrobe. Sometimes you might need a new window. It's just going to come across my bench and I'm going to make it for you with the materials I have. And so I've never made that distinction, never, which is why I've moved around in so many media, because that just feels right to me.
Mhm. And that's the beauty of getting to create. I think that
Yeah.
that is so important as well, alongside, I'm not a super crafty person. I'm not great at making things, but I find it so important to be creative, whatever that means to an individual person. The people I know that really value their creativity, spend time with it, nurture it, they have such an important outlook on life. It really makes a difference in your life to foster that creativity that you have.
You're so right, so right. You can't binge it. It doesn't work like that. It's like, you got to walk your dog twice a day. You got to see your friends. You got to spend time with the people you love. You've got to, or the whole thing breaks down. And that's how it is with create. You got to show up, with creativity, be there for it, and it can be all sorts of things. I mean, I love to cook. In the evening, I like to pour a glass of wine, put the radio on, cook something. Or I love fresh food. I grow a lot in my garden here. But I see that as part of the creative continuum for me. It's who I am. Thinking, what have I got? What can I make of it? What can I play around with? And then I'll enjoy it. And I think if we could live all of our lives with the sense of, I need to make this a creative act as far as possible, or how can I bring creativity to this otherwise meaningless task? It would be better for us. It's the Zen thing, isn't it? That you somehow, even if you're sweeping the floor or whatever you're doing, washing the dishes, you try and bring something to it that gives it meaning, rather than just have your energy sapped away by pointless exercises.
And I think that's how we expand, and that's how we get bigger as people and as like you said, citizens of the world. I feel like I'm not necessarily looking to change my thoughts or to have different thoughts, but I'm always looking to have bigger thoughts and a bigger, connection to the world.
Yeah, and to be challenged too, and
Hmm.
to be able to say things, even if it's only to yourself or your good friend, that a lot of people would say, well, you can't say that. And the truth is, you can say that. And it's better to know it. I mean, there are some people who could never commit murder. I'm not one of those people. Just so that your listeners know if they ever bump into me. Um, but it's good to know that about yourself. I know I could do it. I know I could do it and not tell anyone in the right circumstances. I know I could do it and not feel guilty. And sometimes if I say that, people are really shocked. And I think, well, okay, but wouldn't you rather know what you're capable of? And I think as a fiction writer, I've always thought of fiction particularly, I mean, all creative work, but I'm thinking about fiction here, that it's a lie detector, and that we talk about this in one Aladdin, but you work out who's lying, and sometimes it's you. There are places people won't go, the Bluebeard door, they won't open, the things they won't say, the truth that they'll always bend. And you're forced up against it, and you really have to not avoid that confrontation. Even if you don't do it, even if you bottle it and say, I will not write about this, that is, you're allowed not to write about it, but you're not allowed not to face what you're not going to write about. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so that lie detecting function is really clear to me in creative work. And then we come across it when we're, when we're in the audience, whatever that is, whether it's the theatre or we're going to see an art exhibition or reading a book, whatever we're doing, a piece of music, it can suddenly, blast open some place in us that we did not want to go. And that's the lie detector. You didn't want to go here, did you? No, but you're going there. And that is, I think it's really uncomfortable, as you said, and we're not always comforted. But sometimes this is tough love. It's the pain we have to go through.
And that's something I feel like I've had to work on as I've gotten older, is that sitting in discomfort and reading things that I don't like
No.
and that aren't maybe for me, but there's something in there that I need. There's something in there that will make me a better whatever. But being able to push through that discomfort, I used to be very like, if it's not for me, I'm not going to read it. But I really think we do ourselves a disservice when we have that mindset.
Yeah, we do. And I talk to my students a lot about this. They're a bit cancel culture-y. And I'm always trying to say, can you stop this, please? Because it's not going to help anybody. Things like, this is an example, quite a lot of them won't read Lolita. And I'm saying, yes, it's about the serial rape of a 13-year-old girl. Let's put that on one side in this hand. And in the other hand, what else shall we say? We'll say it's an extraordinary psychological study with passages of great beauty in it, as well as great pain. And would it be better if you read it? I believe so. And that's the conversation. But it can be very hard to get past that thing that, no, somehow this will contaminate me. Actually, it won't. But it'll teach you a lot.
And having that fortitude to go in and say, I know who I am. This book, as much as we
Yeah.
can let things influence us and
Yes.
change us, we don't have to. We have the ability to say,
No.
that's that, and this is me.
Yeah, we do. And that's so important that we are strong enough to take on these challenges, these difficulties, to let things in, to listen to people we really don't want to listen to, saying things that we really don't want to hear. But if we're not in the room, we're not in the conversation, and everybody at the minute is just shouting past each other. And it's my way or the highway, all in these little tribal factions. And all I know for sure is that's not a place of healing. It's not a place of going forward. It's not a place of progress. And so we have to hear stories we don't want to hear, as well as the ones that we do.
And I think that does connect with the idea of who gets to tell whose stories, who gets to tell what stories. If you're not in the room,
Yeah,
you aren't there. Your
yeah.
story isn't being told. And and now we have this ability where there are more stories being told now in very public ways than have ever been before. We really are at a place where we can learn so much, but we have to be in the room to hear it.
Yeah, we do. And we also have to be in the room to hear the lies, that we're bombarded with every single day now, and just recognize them as such and understand why that false narrative is being thrown at us. And it's always very interesting to me, whose story is this? Who's telling this story? Why are they telling it? What do they want you to believe? And you should ask this anyway. I mean, it's why we've got unreliable narrators in fiction. What do they want you to believe? What's their investment in you believing what they want you to believe? What do you want to believe? And that's what you really learn when you're reading fiction, especially when there are competing narratives. And you think, whoa, and you pick your way through it yourself. It's such good practice, such good policy for navigating real situations in real life.
I love it. I love getting to use so many different pieces of what I'm reading in my real life. And I find
Yeah.
that over the years, I've just built, you build an internal library of everything that's sort of connected together. And you talk a lot in this book about things you've read, things you love, influences on you. I mean, from Virginia Woolf to Shrek are mentioned in this
Yeah.
book, and which I love. I love the range. So I was hoping we could talk a little bit about some of your literary influences and books you love.
There's so many. Look, I learned to read on the King James Bible. So that's 66 books rolled in one. Well, 65 because Mrs. Winterson wouldn't read Song of Solomon because it's got sex in it. So I guess we had 65 in our Bible, our Christian Bible. But, it's as good a way as any to start because it teaches you economy of narrative. It teaches you variety and beauty of language. She used to read out loud to me. It teaches you how to tell a story and it teaches you how to persuade people of that story. So, it's not a bad beginning. I don't regret it at all. And from there, as a child, with no I remember I'm an analog human in a digital world. So we grew up with far fewer distractions. And you had to learn how not to be bored. You had to learn about the riches of your own mind. So to create your own life through stories, and the library was a huge part of that, even though I was forbidden to read secular literature. It was all supposed to be religious literature. Of course, you couldn't stop me reading once I was in the library. And once I was able to find books for myself, which is how I found the Arabian Nights, as it was in that version. And it was the librarian who said to me, there's a full version of this called The 1001 Nights. And that's a kind of difference in kind of knowledge base, because I'm just a working class kid, but we've got a Carnegie library, paid for by Andrew Carnegie, made his fortune in America. Steel magnate, endowed libraries all around the world, so that kids like me, kids with nothing going for them, could get at knowledge. And that more than just factual knowledge, stories, imagination, the way the human mind works. And so that for me was decisive. And, it's a story I tell early on, that it's when I'm walking back thinking, how am I going to get out of this town, as an adoptive child as well? I'm not even in the right story. Who are these people? I don't even know what my name is. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the moment I realized that I can change the story because I am the story. And I think you're going to write your way out of here. There is another world. You just got to find it. And so this gave me enormous courage and optimism. And that was entirely through what I found in books, the characters I met who I admired, the characters I met. I didn't want to be like a lot of the women in 19th century novels. I thought, I don't want to be like you. With your diminished life and your small opportunities and the fact that you have to give way to everybody. I didn't have feminism then, but I could see in the stories that there were people you really don't want to be. And it was only much, much later. I mean, I found out about, Madame Bovary. It's a story I tell in one Aladdin. Madame Bovary is published in 1856 by Flaubert in Paris. And a new disease appeared that the doctors actually put it on the records, called Bovaryism. And it only applied to middle-class women who read Madame Bovary. And this disease meant they suddenly got angry with their husbands. They suddenly protested about their life. They suddenly realized that they weren't kind of sex-starved or sex-crazy or neurotic or mad or bad or dysfunctional. They were just living in an institutional hell called marriage. And they'd read Madame Bovary. And that's what happens, You suddenly think, hey, this isn't me. I'm not the weirdo. It's society. This is the problem. And of course, that's what you get as a young person. Even if you're reading 19th century classics, you realize that there is something about the world that isn't going to work for you, especially if you're a woman. Especially if you're a working class woman. And suddenly you get some clues about what's wrong with it all and therefore how you might navigate it. So it was really, for me, reading those classics in English literature and prose, A to Z. I didn't know where to start. I just started at A. It's quite good at the beginning. You get Jane Austen, the Brontes, Conrad, Dickens, George Eliot, and on you go. And in there, you actually find everything you need, I think, in order to build a life, which sounds ridiculous now when probably nobody really reads those books anymore. But what I'm really saying is you can trust literature to help you to find what you need.
Yes, I think I had my moment with House of Mirth. That was my
did you? You an Edith Wharton fan?
Yes, that was me.
Mm.
And I remember reading, and of course, it's those same things of being like, this isn't my life, and yet somehow, is this my life? You have that connection, you have that desire to go above and beyond. And I remember those moments, and I think it's what brings us all to live lives surrounded with books now.
Yes, it is, and it's why we know that we still need them because we've realised, well, what good health they've given us, strength and courage, and also, you don't need your AI companion who'll never challenge you anyway, but a book will always challenge you. It's not just there, as we've said, for comfort. It is comforting overall because reading is amazing and it makes you feel okay overall. But within each specific text, there's always going to be challenge.
Absolutely. Something I like to ask to end out the interview is, do you have any thoughts in mind for who would be really a perfect reader for this book, or someone that you really hope finds it on a table or a shelf somewhere?
Oh, I don't know, maybe Donald Trump, maybe Stephen Miller, or maybe Pete Exeth. There's a few of those guys could do with reading it. I mean, that would be a nice thought. It probably isn't going to happen. But I guess it's the kind of book. It's a kind of book maybe for people who think they're not that interested in reading books. Because, as you say, you can go in anywhere and you can probably find something that speaks to you. Just something about your own life, your own situation, and also about the world we live in now. And I think bringing those things together is what we're looking for in a text. Well, I am anyway.
Me too. And I think that there's going to be so many people that find something to love in this book. So, Jeanette Winterson, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about One Aladdin Two Lamps. I really can't wait for people to read it.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.